Hello, fourth graders. Welcome to another day of science. We are talking this week about how we could design a scenario to demonstrate the effect of a change on an ecosystem. And we are working on several learning targets that are: I can identify common changes that impact an ecosystem. I can identify living and non-living factors that are impacted by the change. And I can explain the effects of a change on both living and non-living organisms in an ecosystem. So yesterday we did our Tinker Time activity and we watched a video on cane toads. On Monday we looked at our phenomenon called Oh Dear and talked a little bit about that. Today I'm going to give you a little bit of content information, and then we're going to watch another video that is an example of a scenario that changed an ecosystem. Okay? And I want you to think about everything we've learned about food webs and food chains as we get ready to think about these scenarios of change. So this is just some vocabulary we've been working on. I want to be sure you have a good understanding of all of these words. Ecosystem is a community of living and non-living things in their natural environment. A role is a job. Organisms are living things, and we can classify organisms as producers, consumers, or decomposers. Producers are the living things that make their own food using sunlight, water, and carbon monoxide to make sugars. Consumers are organisms that cannot make their own food, and they rely on either producers or other consumers for their energy and their food. And then decomposers are organisms that break down dead organisms to get energy and return nutrients from those decaying plants and animals back into the soil. Okay, so we have been talking a lot about food chains, and we understand that a food chain is the path that energy transfers from one organism to another. And the sun provides the energy that starts all food chains. All of the sun's energy goes, or producers, those green plants get all of their energy from the sun. And then as one thing eats the green plant and another thing eats that consumer and another thing eats that consumer, we have a food chain. So in this example, we have the sun, which is producing energy, which makes the grass grow. The grasshopper is eating the grass. The frog is eating the grasshopper. The snake is eating the frog, and the hawk is eating the steak. And energy is passing between each organism as it is eaten by another. And all of these things take in energy of everything that was eaten before it. So the hawk not only gets energy from the snake, but it gets energy from the frog, the grasshopper, the grass, and the sun. Okay, so usually animals, consumers, eat more than one thing for their food, more than one food source. So this actually creates more than one food chain. And when these food chains are all wrapped up together, we get a food web. And a food web is just an interconnected set of food chains that are connected together. And they're the same as food chains in that all the energy comes from the sun to producers and then is transferred through different consumers. So in this example, we see two producers. We see grass and we see acacia tree, and energy is transferred from those producers to all of these different organisms. Now, if you want to trace a specific food chain in this food web, remember that arrows flow from a producer to the consumer in the direction that the energy is flowing. So you start at a producer and follow arrows outward to find a food chain. All right, so we've really been working hard on this the last few weeks, and we know that an organism's surroundings or its environment have both living elements and non-living things. So the non-living things might be rocks, water, things that are not alive, dirt, right? And we know what all the living organisms are. So a community of living and non-living things must provide the basic needs for each organism to survive. And those basic needs are air, water, shelter, and a space to live. If an organism's basic needs are not met, then the plant or animal will have to respond to this change. And you learned about this in 3rd grade when you learned about adaptations. So animals can adapt. So one way they might do that is by moving to another area. If they're not able to adapt or by moving or slowly changing their actual body or habits, they will perish, which is another word for die. So we saw this in our phenomenon earlier in the week, right? And we know that something happens to these deer. For some reason, their needs were not being met where they were. So now they have 2 choices. They have to move if they want to live. Okay, so that was really what this phenomenon was getting us thinking about earlier in the week. Now, yesterday in our Tinker Time, we saw some different scenarios that could happen. And these things could be natural or they could be man-made. And these things can affect an ecosystem. So we saw a flood, we see construction, we see humans spraying pesticides or chemicals. We could have a drought, which is the opposite of a flood. Instead of having too much water, we have not enough water. We could have tornadoes, or as we've had recently, some big hurricanes. We also could have humans over hunting, taking too many things out of an ecosystem. Now, these changes are going to cause several things, or could cause several different effects. One could be something could become scarce, okay? And if something is scarce, it is rare. It only exists in small amounts. So a plant or animal could become scarce as a result of one of these changes. Something could even go extinct. We usually think of dinosaurs when we think about extinct, but that also has happened to other species and can happen as a result of some of these changes. Another thing that might happen is something could become overabundant. That means there are too many, there are an excessive number. And we saw this with the cane toads in Australia. Now, the other thing that can happen is a species could perish. It could die. So, yesterday we saw about the cane toads in Australia. And it's very interesting because some of these changes that are man-made were made in order or thinking that they would be helping an ecosystem, right? And we saw yesterday that these cane toads that were brought in to eat bugs on sugarcane had the exact opposite effect because they ate everything except the bugs, and then everything that ate them died. So today we're going to see another example of this happening, this time here in the United States, and this is about some things that have happened over the last almost 100 years in Yellowstone Park. And I put a map here so you can see where we are talking about. And we know where Georgia is in the southeast of our country. We see Yellowstone out in the northwestern part of our country, bordering on several states, Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. So we're going to watch this video and see a little bit of history about wolves in Yellowstone Park. So we can pause this video to watch the next video. Okay, so as we wrap up for today, I want you to be thinking about all of these changes we have been learning about, as well as the other scenarios that we've looked at pictures of. And I want you to think about what changes these could cause to an ecosystem. Tomorrow, you're going to begin on some work where you're going to have to make predictions about what these different scenarios could do to change ecosystems and the effects that they might have on the food chains and food webs there, including also non-living things in those ecosystems. So if you need to rewatch any videos, relook at any pictures, do it today because tomorrow you're going to have some work to do. All right, guys, thank you for your great attention in science, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.